Welcome, guys and geeks, to the MCU Chronological Timeline version 7.0. It's been over 2 years since our last update, and this will be our biggest video yet. The MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, continues to grow. Phase 4 is well underway, and it's changed the way that we engage with the universe. It's opened the doors to the multiverse, meaning we now have to consider films from other timelines altogether when we compile our watch orders. This video is designed to make it as easy as possible for you to determine for yourselves what the next film or show will be on your chronological viewing order. Whether you only want to watch the Marvel Studios projects, if you want to include multiverse titles, or even add on the larger Marvel TV canon into the mix, we've got you covered. This video will either be my magnum opus or the biggest waste of time ever, and that all depends on whether you show the algorithm that you enjoyed it by clicking the like button, subscribing, and watching all the way through. Those familiar with my previous timelines will remember that we used to put everything on a grid. That simply doesn't work anymore. There's now too many titles to realistically fit on one screen and look good, even in 4K. Also, placing the multiverse titles into the mix makes the grid confusing, and many of you no longer consider a large swath of Marvel TV canon. So here's what we're gonna do. We're going to start with only the Marvel Studios films and shows and introduce them as they occur on the sacred timeline. As we go, we'll introduce other multiversal timelines as they intersect with the sacred timeline. And to make the die-hard MCU fans happy, we'll then introduce all the Marvel TV titles and show where they fit in between films. This video will contain spoilers for just about every major event and title, so be warned. If you'd prefer to simply download a high-quality picture of the complete timeline, you'll find a link in the description to our Patreon where you can download the image for free. While you're there, if you'd like to support our work, I greatly appreciate it. Now, onto the timeline. Our journey begins at the height of America's involvement in World War II, as Steve Rogers becomes the first and possibly only successful super soldier ever. It's the birth of the superhero in the modern epic, one whose moral compass and character are just as impressive as his enhanced physical attributes. Steve takes up the mantle of Captain America, and the film elapses from 1942 to 1945, as he takes down Hydra one shield throw at a time. Captain America crashes into the Arctic in March of 1945. Moving forward, we'll use the climax or the third act of each film to determine where it sits on our timeline. The earliest Marvel one-shot on the timeline is none other than Agent Carter, which follows Peggy Carter. One-shots are short films produced by Marvel Studios that canonically expand the story of the films they're attached to. In this short, we see the early stages of the S.H.I.E.L.D. organization develop. Jumping forward almost 50 years, Captain Marvel takes us to the summer of '95. Here, the Kree-trained warrior named Vers follows several shape-shifting aliens named the Skrulls to Earth, only to eventually discover her true origins as the Air Force pilot Carol Danvers. Along the way, we're introduced to a young Nick Fury and Phil Coulson during their earlier days working for S.H.I.E.L.D. There would be no MCU if it weren't for our next entry on the timeline, and it's an incredible film to boot. Billionaire weapons dealer Tony Stark is kidnapped by a branch of the Ten Rings terrorist group in an attempt to get him to build them weapons in secret. Instead, he builds a means for his escape and the prototype to the eventual Iron Man suits we see throughout the films. Iron Man originally occurred in 2008 and then was retconned several times as occurring in 2009 and then in 2010, but the most recent retcon brings us right back to 2008, so that's where we're gonna put it. The reason Iron Man is retconned so often is because of its relationship with Fury's Big Week, a group of films that occur concurrently. Iron Man 2 claims to be 6 months after the first film, but because Fury's Big Week is supposed to also occur a year before Avengers, and Iron Man is later retconned to occur back in 2008, this line is no longer canonical. For more timeline fumbles and mistakes, watch this video where I break down the top 10 biggest timeline errors in the MCU. Anyway, Iron Man 2 introduces a new hero in Black Widow and showcases the rise of Rhodey as War Machine. Easily the most forgotten and retconned film in the series, The Incredible Hulk is also one of the most underrated. Despite having replaced both the lead actor in the role of Bruce Banner and ignoring its own timeline so as to retroactively fit it within Fury's Big Week, it's great that we got a Hulk movie where he's played straight and not just as comedic relief. In this film, Bruce Banner is on the run from General Thaddeus Ross and Emil Blonsky, who eventually turns himself into Abomination. This film occurs over 5 months, but the majority of it occurs concurrently to and shortly after the events of Iron Man 2. In our first one-shot to occur during Fury's Big Week, a funny thing happened on the way to Thor's hammer. We follow Agent Phil Coulson as he stops a robbery on his way to New Mexico, which ties in with the events in Thor. Thor is our introduction to the vast Marvel pantheon of gods in the MCU. It's presumed the Asgardians haven't visited Earth in centuries, having since faded into Norse myth. Having been stripped of his titles and strength, Thor must prove to himself and his king that he is again worthy to possess the powers once bestowed to him and enhanced by his hammer Mjolnir. He is stuck on Midgard, or Earth for the time being, where we meet his love interest in Jane Foster. In the wake of Thor's absence, his adoptive brother Loki makes a play at the throne of Asgard. We also get our first look at Hawkeye. Thor is the final film to occur during Fury's big week in 2011, occurring mostly concurrent to the events of Iron Man 2 and The Incredible Hulk. The Consultant is the last title in Fury's big week. Coulson meets up with fellow S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Jasper Sitwell to discuss not including Abomination into the Avengers initiative, as well as using Tony Stark as a consultant between S.H.I.E.L.D. and General Ross. This occurs before the post-credits scene in The Incredible Hulk, but we're not going to break up any of the films on this list. By the way, you can now find this and every other Marvel one-shot on Disney+. In Avengers, which neatly fits in the first week of May 2012, Nick Fury brings together Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, Black Widow, and Hawkeye to form the first iteration of the team known as the Avengers. Loki steals the Tesseract and uses it to create a portal to facilitate the Chitauri invasion of New York at the behest of Thanos. The Avengers must learn to work as a team to stop the threat and save the world. This occurs about a year after Fury's big week. In the Item 47 Marvel one-shot, we see amateur bank robbers wield abandoned Chitauri weaponry they picked up from the Battle of New York. This occurs shortly after the Avengers, becoming the blueprint for the early seasons of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. More on that when we get to the Marvel TV side of the MCU. Now, before we continue, please note that there will be several differences between our MCU timeline and the one you'll find on Disney+. The Disney Plus timeline is occasionally incorrect, especially when it comes to Phase 4. I've spent the better part of a decade studying the Marvel Cinematic Universe timeline and knowing that the closest thing to an official timeline is so often incorrect, that keeps me up at night. I bring this up because the next film on our timeline is none other than Iron Man 3, which Disney Plus has after Thor: The Dark World. There's a case to be made for both orders, but we know that this occurs about 13 years after New Year's Eve in 1999, and considering this takes place at Christmas time, that places this in December of 2012. That's where we place Iron Man 3 on our timeline. For more info on individual placements for these films and shows, please be sure to check out our multi-part series, When Does the MCU Take Place? In Iron Man 3, we find Tony struggling to cope after the Battle of New York, while old acquaintances come back to haunt him as Aldrich Killian and Maya Hansen introduce the world to the Extremis Project. We're also introduced to a fake Mandarin, played by actor Trevor Slattery, pretending to be connected to the Ten Rings, the terrorist organization that kidnapped Tony Stark 4 years prior. All Hail the King brings us into 2013 and is the last Marvel one-shot to grace our list. No, the Team Thor films are not canon. Here, we regroup with Trevor Slattery to see how prison life is treating him. He's interviewed to determine if he truly does know anything about the Ten Rings organization, and things go downhill pretty quickly. This occurs shortly after Iron Man 3. Every 5,000 years, the convergence of the Nine Realms occurs, opening a portal between worlds, and this time it falls in November 2013. Malekith and the Dark Elves plan to use the convergence to transform the universe into eternal darkness, through the power of the Ether. While this may be one of the flattest MCU films in terms of story, it makes up for it in the amount of lore that oozes from every scene, which makes it a fun ride for me personally. Where does Thor: The Dark World rank for you in the MCU? Adapting to a 21st century lifestyle isn't easy for Steve Rogers, but a new threat emerges as a rogue cell within S.H.I.E.L.D. overthrows the organization. He and Natasha Romanoff take on the newly emerged Hydra. A new threat emerges from Steve's past as we discover Bucky has become the Winter Soldier. This is also our first introduction to Sam Wilson. This film occurs in spring 2014. With the Guardians of the Galaxy films, we begin to open up the MCU on a more cosmic scale. 26 years after a young Peter Quill is abducted from Earth in 1988, we learn he's taken on the moniker of Star-Lord. He's trying to sell an Infinity Stone, but must fight to keep it out of the hands of the Kree radical Ronan the Accuser, and in so doing joins a team of misfits which include Drax, Rocket, Groot, and Gamora to save the fate of the galaxy. This is a pivotal film in terms of detailing the family dynamics of Thanos, Gamora, and Nebula, which will affect the fate of the galaxy in a big way 4 years later. When exactly in 2014 this occurs isn't certain, but this fits well in the summer, shortly after The Winter Soldier. The second Guardians of the Galaxy film occurs 2 or 3 months after the first film. A mysterious entity known as Ego claims to be Peter's father, and we learn much more about Peter's background, his relationship with Yondu, and how his mother really died all those years ago. Naturally, it doesn't bode well for Peter and the Guardians, as being half celestial isn't all it's cracked up to be. Along the way, we also meet Mantis, a powerful empath, and Nebula reluctantly aids the Guardians. This film likely occurs autumn 2014. Tony and Bruce create a prototype AI to essentially become a suit of armor around the world, named Ultron. This, like any other AI in popular media, comes to life and becomes the primary antagonist of the story. Ultron is intent on making the world a better place for beings not constrained by human emotions. Avengers Age of Ultron introduces key players that will reshape the future of the MCU, such as Wanda and Vision. But not you, Pietro. Ultron grows in strength and eventually tries to use the capital city of Sokovia as a meteor to destroy the human race. Avengers Age of Ultron takes place in the summer of 2015. After 3 years in prison, former thief Scott Lang is released on July 17, 2015. After several months of being unable to hold down a job long enough to pay child support, he reverts back to his old ways of robbery, only to find a dusty old suit that just so happens to shrink you down to the size of an ant. Hank Pym, the original Ant-Man, sends Scott on a journey that will transform him into the Ant-Man of the 21st century. This film opens up the quantum realm, which has huge ramifications for the future of the MCU and the multiverse. Ant-Man's climax occurs on October 9th, 2015. The events of New York, Sokovia, and now Lagos have galvanized the countries of the world to sign into effect the Sokovia Accords, a set of laws that regulate vigilantism across sovereign borders. The Accords divide the Avengers into two opposing ideals, and thus Captain America Civil War becomes a pivotal period on our chronology. It not only places itself well on the timeline, but it wonderfully puts the films before and after it into perspective as well. This is how we know the original Iron Man takes place in 2008.
In the 8 years since Mr. Stark announced himself as Iron Man, the number of known enhanced persons has grown exponentially.
The climax of Captain America Civil War occurs during the first week of April 2016. The film also introduces us to Spider-Man and Black Panther. Though the film was released in 2021, Black Widow firmly sets itself in 2016. Natasha Romanoff, on the run from General Thaddeus Ross, is reunited with her one sister, Yelena Belova. Together they reunite their old family to find and bring down the Red Room, the facility that produces highly trained spies known as Black Widows. Along the way, they encounter the antagonist, Taskmaster, though the true threat is much darker. The film begins a day after Natasha is told by Stark that Ross is after her, and runs partially concurrent to the post-credits scene in Civil War. This film begins several days before Black Panther. Black Panther begins 1 week after the death of King T'Chaka in Civil War. After leaving Bucky in Wakanda, T'Challa and Okoye pick up Nakia, and by the time they head back to Wakanda, T'Challa is ready to begin the coronation ritual that will make him the rightful ruler of the country. His claim to the throne is challenged by a ghost from his father's past, as Killmonger comes forth as the son of Prince Njobu. His plan is to use Wakanda's advanced technology to arm those of African descent around the world and overthrow their governments. The film sits just after Black Widow. Spider-Man Homecoming claims to begin 2 short months after Captain America Civil War. This cannot be true. Homecoming also claims to be 8 years after the first Avengers film. This is also untrue.
8 years?
Like, that's very not true. In fact, the only reference to time in the entire film that kind of works with the rest of the MCU timeline is at the very end, when Happy claims,
"I've been carrying this since 2008.
Which just so happens to line up with Iron Man. Homecoming is the worst when it comes to its timeline placement, but we can safely pick up the pieces as fans, determine that it occurs in September 2016, and just enjoy a fun film, right? This begins a trilogy of self-discovery that will make up this iteration of the character's unique origin journey. Doctor Strange is unique in that it starts before the other films in 2016, but ends after them, at around November or December. Stephen Strange gets into a car accident in February, ruining his ability to continue working as a neurosurgeon. He goes out of his way to try every possible treatment and procedure over the next couple of months in the hopes of getting his hands back, and this search leads him to Kamar-Taj. There, under the tutelage of the Ancient One, Strange begins his training in the mystic arts, and after several months, he takes up the mantle of Sorcerer Supreme. By the end of the film, still in 2016, Stephen leaves behind the Eye of Agamotto at Kamar-Taj. But later, in the 2017 post-credits scene, he's seen wearing the Eye of Agamotto in New York, which ties in nicely with a certain date given to us in Avengers Endgame. Our placement for Thor Ragnarok might confuse some of you, but there's a simple answer as to why it doesn't occur directly before Infinity War. Between the main events in the film and the mid-credits scene, there's about a half-year gap that goes unseen. That's the only way to make sense of the 2 years that have passed since Bruce left Earth in Age of Ultron, because it would be 3 years if it were just before Infinity War. In Ragnarok, we see the return of Thor's long-lost sister Hela, and the eventual destruction of Asgard in the Twilight of the Gods. We're also introduced to Korg, Valkyrie, and the Grandmaster in Sakaar. With 3 days left on Scott Lang's 2-year house arrest after he aided in the events of Captain America Civil War, Ant-Man and the Wasp starts at the earliest mid to late April 2018. Scott and Hope find themselves caught up in a quantum heist around San Francisco, as Hank Pym traverses the quantum realm in search of his long-lost wife, Janet Van Dyne. Like Thor Ragnarok, the mid-credits scene confuses the timeline somewhat. The primary events in the film do not occur directly before Infinity War, but several weeks before. Note that after the climax, we see a montage of events where our protagonists get new jobs, go on vacation, and enjoy other forms of recreation. So it's not possible for it to begin 3 days before Infinity War, as some believe. Thanos has had enough waiting, and he's ready to find the 6 Infinity Stones himself. In Avengers Infinity War, our heroes face off against the greatest threat yet, stopping Thanos from getting all 6 Infinity Stones. The Guardians of the Galaxy also find themselves caught in the mix of things as they team up with the Avengers to take him down. This is the first true instance of a superhero film ending with the villain overcoming the hero's best efforts without being apprehended, and showcases a loss so crippling for our protagonists it will take them years to recuperate. This film occurs during the spring of 2018. Avengers Endgame makes perhaps the most interesting timeline choice in all of the MCU. The movie jumps 5 years into the future, a choice that got an audible gasp out of me in the theater. This shifts everything after it 5 years as well, into 2023, and wreaks havoc on the interconnectivity of the Marvel TV canon. The remaining Avengers, along with Rocket, go on a heist throughout time, traveling to different periods in search of the Infinity Stones before Thanos ever got his hands on them. The goal being to bring everyone back that was snapped away 5 years prior. They catch the attention of a 2014 variant of Thanos who travels to Earth in October 2023 to head the heroes off and finish what he started. Our heroes find themselves victorious, but they leave open some loose ends that will have lasting consequences on this timeline and others. The biggest loose end was Loki slipping away with the Tesseract in a branched 2012 timeline. This leads us directly into Season 1 of Loki, as the God of Mischief is brought before the Time Variance Authority for crimes against the sacred timeline. One of the TVA's agents, Morbius, chooses to take Loki on so that they can track down another Loki variant that's running about on the timeline. This Loki, known as Sylvie Laufey-Daughter, is on a mission to bring down the Timekeepers, but it turns out there's a man behind the curtain running things from the top. The sacred timeline has been removed from other universes, and each new branch in a timeline is summarily removed before it becomes its own universe. But by the end of Loki's first season, the doors to the multiverse have been opened wide. Thanks to Loki opening up the multiverse, What If Season 1 introduces us to a number of potential universes, from the possibility of Peggy Carter taking the super soldier serum instead of Steve Rogers, to what if the Avengers lost to Ultron? Uatu the Watcher, an interdimensional being, struggles with his oath of staying neutral as he observes chaos transpiring across the multiverse. Considering this takes place outside of the sacred timeline, for us to place it on our timeline, it needs to be connected to the branch created out of Endgame and Loki. These 9 episodes are best kept as a group right here. One of the more interesting explorations of genre within the MCU is the sitcom-style structure of WandaVision. But soon the mystery unfolds and the true threat reveals herself. Beginning 3 weeks after Endgame, WandaVision follows Wanda and Vision trying to live a happy life within the town of Westview, New Jersey. We also follow the point of view of those outside of Westview, such as Darcy Lewis, Jimmy Woo, and Monica Rambeau, whom we first met in Captain Marvel. Occurring in early November, this is our last title that will slot in 2023. From here on out, we have serious differences between our timeline and the Disney Plus timeline. We'll explain why we place the items where we do for each. The Eternals have been on Earth for 7,000 years, but their mission from the Celestials is clear. Remain neutral and don't get involved with the course of human history unless the Deviants are involved. The film bounces around the timeline quite a bit, but the majority occurs in present day. When exactly post-blip is up for considerable debate. If you ask Marvel producer Nate Moore, it happens around July 2024. If you ask the film's writers, it's about April. If you believe Disney Plus, it falls about fall 2024. There's one scene that occurs during fall, but the majority of the film occurs during winter. And it also has to be roughly 5 years after the snap.
5 years ago, Thanos erased half of the population of the universe.
All of this is contradictory information. Eternal's timeline is a confusing mess. Taking all this info into account, we can find the medium time frame is early 2024 in winter. This is where we place Eternals currently. Shang-Chi has lived an unassuming life in San Francisco for the past 10 years, since leaving the Ten Rings behind. That is until his father's men attack him and chase him all the way to Macau, where he finds his sister, Xialing. His father claims he's been hearing his dead mother's voice, trapped in Ta Lo, but the only day Wenwu can safely get into Ta Lo is via a path that opens up on the third day of the Qingming Festival. This holiday is brought up several times throughout the film, so it's quite an important time frame. But Disney Plus's timeline ignores this fact in favor of placing it after The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But considering the holiday is such an important part to Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings plot, it has to occur late March into early April 2024, several weeks before Falcon and the Winter Soldier even begins. The Falcon and the Winter Soldier firmly sets itself 6 months after everyone returns from the blip, and it elapses several months, so it occurs between mid-April and June, most likely. The world is reeling from the sudden population surge, and the Global Repatriation Council has its hands full trying to rehouse and manage the livelihood of everyone brought back. Many feel that the government is prioritizing those that have been missing for 5 years over those that have already been there. Sam Wilson and Bucky Barnes, both former sidekicks to Captain America, do their best to maintain order among dissidents, while attempting to live up to the complicated history of Captain America and the Super Soldier program. We're also introduced to John Walker, who briefly assumes the mantle of Captain America before Sam officially takes on the shield. Despite Spider-Man Homecoming being the worst timeline offender in the MCU, its sequel, Far From Home, is much more grounded. It takes place 8 months after everyone was returned from the blip. And because this occurs at the end of the New York school year, we can safely say this occurs over the course of June and July 2024. Peter and his friends take an end-of-the-year trip to Europe only for it to be derailed at every turn by giant elemental monsters. This film ends with Peter Parker being unmasked as Spider-Man and blamed for the death of Mysterio. Spider-Man No Way Home sees the fallout of the revelation that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and the ramifications for those he loves now that his name is connected with the murder of Mysterio. Reaching out to Doctor Strange to patch things up, Peter opens up a whole can of multiversal worms. But Peter Parker gets a bit of help from Peter Parker, as well as Peter Parker. The film begins just 1 short week after MJ learns that Peter is Spider-Man in July, and his legal issues span some 4 months. The crux of the story unfolds in November, and the epilogue occurs sometime in early December. With Spider-Man No Way Home, we officially open the MCU to the multiverse of titles that occur on other timelines. 3 different universes are unlocked to now explore some measure of interconnectivity. This means we'll have to wind the years back to place them where they take place respectively on their own timelines. The timeline here only shows you when they intersect with the sacred timeline, so it's up to you to decide if you want to add them to your viewing order. First up, we have the films on Earth 96283. Spider-Man, the film from 2002, was originally set in 2001. Every date we see mentioned in the film has it in 2001, but this was retconned to 2002 thanks to its sequel. The story begins with Peter in high school getting his powers near the end of his high school career around April. Uncle Ben dies around May, and shortly afterward, Peter graduates. The majority of the film's runtime occurs across October and November of 2002, with a significant portion taking place during Thanksgiving. Spider-Man 2, arguably one of the greatest films in the genre, occurs 2 years after the start of the first film. The film spans a couple months between spring and summer. Because the in-film dates claim it to be 2004, we have to retcon Spider-Man 1 from 2001 to 2002 to compensate. Despite Spider-Man 3 arriving in theaters in 2007, only 1 year has presumably passed since the events of the second film, and appropriately all dates in Spider-Man 3 occur in 2005. 19 years pass before the Peter Parker in Spider-Man 3 visits the MCU in No Way Home. Jumping over to Earth 120703, we have the Amazing Spider-Man duology. This first outing with Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man takes place in the fall of 2012 as he begins the new school year, gets his powers, and meets Gwen Stacy. The Lizard attacks in October 2012. The second Amazing Spider-Man film is tough to place on the timeline because the time elapsed after he graduates and the third act of the film isn't clear, and the dates featured don't really add up to anything conclusive. The best guess I can come up with is summer 2013 into early 2014. 10 years pass before this version of Peter is seen again in No Way Home. Our last multiversal timeline to add to version 7 hasn't been given an official Marvel timeline designation, so we'll use its temporary reality number, Earth TRN 688. Here we have Venom, which begins in 2018 and jumps about a half a year ahead to early 2019. There are no dates featured in Morbius, but a reference to Venom tells us that it's after at least the first film. In-world promo material indicates this occurs in June 2019, and the 2 credit scenes occur in 2024, somewhat tying in with No Way Home. Roughly 18 months later, Venom's sequel, Let There Be Carnage, arrives in the fall of 2020. 4 years pass between Let There Be Carnage and when Eddie Brock and the Venom symbiote travel to the MCU. In Hawkeye, Clint Barton takes his kids to New York in an attempt to spend as much time with them as possible during the Christmas season, but gets caught up in finding his old Ronin suit, now being worn by the young archer Kate Bishop. He becomes her unwitting partner as they take on characters like Maya Lopez and Wilson Fisk, and uncover the truths of Kate's family's legacy. Each episode spans the length of a day, as the days draw closer to Clint Barton missing out on Christmas with his family, with the final episode arriving on Christmas Eve. Several months after the spell goes awry in No Way Home, Doctor Strange is caught up in another multiversal journey. America Chavez is on the run from incredibly dangerous dark forces that are trying to drain her of her powers, as she's uniquely capable of creating portals throughout the multiverse. The true threat reveals herself as Strange attempts to protect America, but he gets caught up in the politics of other universes. What follows in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is probably the craziest film in the MCU, which likely occurs in the spring of 2025. This film is also the 4th time that the MCU, or Sacred Timeline, is referred to as Earth 616, instead of Earth 199999, as fans have historically believed it to be designated, so 616 is the designation we will use from here on out. Also, the universe that Professor X shows up in is not the same universe as the 90s X-Men animated series, despite several similarities, so we won't be connecting that timeline to the MCU, for now. Moon Knight is difficult to place on the timeline as the writers themselves didn't know when it would occur, but Disney Plus places it after Hawkeye, making it the first title in 2025, but second chronologically. On-screen dates read that the Ancient Egypt exhibit that Steven worked at runs from April 22nd to July 29th. So it's safe to say this occurs sometime in mid to late spring 2025, and elapses several weeks. Mark Spector is the latest avatar of Khonshu, the Egyptian god of the moon, and has a uniquely fractured mind, as he suffers from dissociative identity disorder, meaning he also shares his mind with the lovable Stephen Grant. Together, the two must come together to face the return of Ammit, and they get some help from Mark's wife Layla. That's it for the Marvel Studios and Multiverse titles. We're not done yet though, as we still have the Marvel TV stuff to squeeze in. But if you've enjoyed what you've seen so far and appreciate the work that we've put into this timeline, please don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because we'll have updates to this timeline as more titles drop in the future. This is a labor of love, and it's a personal goal of mine to eventually work with Marvel Studios to manage an official timeline and help future titles fit more appropriately onto it. Time is essential to storytelling, and is an often unseen but integral part to every story ever told in one way or another. And it's so much more important when you're developing a universe as vast as the MCU. I truly hope this video helps you. By the way, if you like what you've seen so far, maybe you'd enjoy my podcast, Project Geekology, where my friend and I give in-depth geeky reviews of films and shows like The Batman, Over the Garden Wall, Lord of the Rings, No Way Home, and much, much more. You'll find a link in the description, but you can find our show wherever you listen to podcasts, like Apple, Google, Spotify, Audible, etc.
How are we on the timeline?
Patience, Mr. Fisk. From here on out, this video is for the die-hard MCU fans only, the ones who truly wish to watch each individual entry, especially the Marvel TV selection. Please note that all of these titles were at one point considered MCU canon, but in recent years, their canonicity has been in question. I'm not here to convince you one way or another, that's not an argument worth having. The only show worth breaking up mid-season to fit films in between its seasons is Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. because it's meant to reflect the greater events within the MCU. No, Hellstrom is not MCU canon. We begin with Agent Carter. In the fall of 1946, Peggy Carter gets her own series, and the first season fits about a year after Captain America: The First Avenger. A year after that, in July of 1947, Season 2 of Agent Carter sees Peggy face off against new atomic age threats, taking her from New York to Los Angeles. This fits before the Agent Carter one-shot. Jumping forward to 2013, it's time to meet our agents, and the first batch of 7 episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 1. This fits nicely after All Hail the King. The second batch of episodes, 8 through 16, pick up directly after the events in Thor the Dark World, and lead into the fall of the S.H.I.E.L.D. organization in The Winter Soldier. After Winter Soldier, the final 6 episodes cover the fallout of Hydra briefly taking over S.H.I.E.L.D. Now we begin to introduce series that occur within the Defender saga, beginning with Daredevil Season 1. If you guys haven't watched the first season of Daredevil, you're missing out on top tier MCU. This fits in the fall of 2014, shortly after Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. With Jessica Jones Season 1, we close out 2014 with one of the MCU's most chilling chapters, as she attempts to go against Kilgrave, one of her prior abusers. We're also introduced to Luke Cage. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 2 takes us into 2015 as the Inhumans are introduced through Terrigenesis. The first 19 episodes lead nicely into Avengers Age of Ultron. The remaining 3 episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 2 follow the Battle of Sokovia in Age of Ultron. Next up is the in-universe news station WHIH Newsfront, which covers the fallout of Sokovia in its first season. These 5 episodes were previously available on the official YouTube channel, but have since been deleted. We've re-uploaded both seasons into one video right here. These tie directly into the release of Ant-Man. Simmons is trapped in the Monolith world in the first half of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 3. Episodes 1 through 10 occur shortly after Ant-Man. We're introduced to the Punisher in Season 2 of Daredevil. This takes place about a year after the first season and occurs in autumn of 2015. The next handful of episodes from Season 3 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., episodes 11 through 19, run concurrently with Daredevil before it and Luke Cage after it. The first season of Luke Cage sees Luke take the responsibility of Harlem on his shoulders and becomes the hero the neighborhood needs. This season he takes on Cottonmouth and Diamondback. Bringing in 2016, we have Iron Fist's first season. Danny Rand, long presumed dead, returns to New York to reclaim his family's legacy, but grapples with the responsibility of being the new Iron Fist. Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist team up in The Defenders, which wraps up the main story threads from Daredevil's second season and Iron Fist's first. The 4 take on The Hand about a month after the events in Iron Fist, in a series that's less than the sum of its parts. Season 2 of the WHIH Newsfront web series comes next and leads directly into the attack on Lagos, Nigeria at the start of Captain America Civil War, so it likely occurs in March 2016. It's time to close out Season 3 of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. with episodes 20 through 22, which follow shortly after the events of Civil War and the newly ratified Sokovia Accords. After Spider-Man Homecoming comes the first season of The Punisher. It takes place roughly a year after Daredevil Season 2 and ends around November. The beginning and end of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. web series Slingshot takes place after Episode 8 of Season 4, but the majority of Slingshot occurs before the start of the season, so we won't break it up. This brings us into 2017. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 4 arrives next, and we'll keep together the whole season this time, as there aren't any films to break it up. We previously set Cloak and Dagger Season 1 in February 2015, but we recognize that it's been retconned or clarified to occur in 2017 thanks to Tyrone and Tandy appearing in Season 3 of Runaways. While Inhumans may be the most maligned show on our timeline, it hasn't been retconned out of canon by anyone with any authority on the matter. So it sits right here in 2017. 17 years after the car accident that tragically killed her family, Jessica Jones finds out that not all is as it seems. Season 2 falls right here. Luke Cage Season 2 arrives in August 2017 as Luke meets his match in Bushmaster. But perhaps his most noteworthy foe is the owner of Harlem's Paradise, Mariah Dillard. While the first handful of episodes in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5 occur over 90 years in the future, we'll adhere to the characters' relative timelines, which would occur next chronologically. Iron Fist Season 2 arrives shortly after the events in Thor Ragnarok and is a marked improvement over the first season. This occurs around November 2017. Cloak and Dagger Season 2 has also been moved up about 2 years to late 2017, thanks to Runaways retconning it. Bridget O'Reilly shows up, which gives this series some connective tissue with Luke Cage. Daredevil Season 3 occurs in late 2017 as well, and is the last time we see Matt Murdock until 2024. Here we're introduced to Bullseye. Runaway Season 1 occurs over the course of the holiday season as we get to explore the west coast of the MCU a bit. Finally, actually picking up the courage to run away, Runaway Season 2 picks up a day after the first season ends and brings us into 2018. Season 3 of Runaways picks up shortly after and introduces the Cloak and Dagger crew to the mix. There's a 6-month jump mid-season, and this season seems to think it occurs in 2019, which isn't likely, so we'll place it here. Over a year after the first season, The Punisher Season 2 takes place in early 2018, occurring after Daredevil Season 3, a fact confirmed by the personal arc of Karen Page. Jessica Jones Season 3 is both the last of the Defender saga to be released and the last season chronologically. With the agents now back in their presumed normal timeline, we'll place Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5, episodes 11 through 18, right before the events of Ant-Man and the Wasp. The final 4 episodes of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5 lead directly into Thanos' invasion of Earth, and should be watched before Avengers Infinity War. Despite the fact that from this point forward, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. doesn't make mention of the snap that kills half of all life in the universe, it does claim to be a year later, making this summer 2019. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. was the first of many shows produced by Marvel TV, and it outlived all of them as the final canon title to be produced. The 7th season, despite being a tumble through time, ends a year after Season 6, and is the only thing we'll place in 2020. Next, we'll jump forward to 2024 as you'll want to catch the in-universe tie-in to Far From Home, a series of 6 short YouTube videos posted by the dailybugle.net that follow the events of the film. The dailybugle.net Season 2, a series of 13 TikToks hosted by Betty Brant and J. Jonah Jameson, should be watched after Spider-Man No Way Home, despite most of it occurring during its runtime. The dailybugle.net Season 3 is technically an in-world multiverse series tying in with Morbius, giving us the dates for June 2019. And with that, we close out our MCU Chronological Timeline version 7.0. I'm so grateful you watched this, as I've put so much work into it over the past few weeks and months. Please don't forget to like this video on your way out, and subscribe if you'd like to see more like it. This video isn't possible without the monthly support of our patrons. You guys are amazing. I'll be updating the 7.0 visual timeline exclusively on Patreon as new titles arrive within the MCU. Check out more timeline content right here. Have a good one.